After years of living under the harsh control of the Cedar Grove HOA, they finally crossed the line when they raised my fees for having too many cars in my own driveway. But what they don't know is that I've been quietly buying up most of this neighborhood over the past 5 years through my real estate company Evergreen Holdings. Now it's time for me to show Linda Hayes, our power-tripping HOA president, who really runs Cedar Grove. Will she back down quietly when I reveal this secret? I never wanted trouble with the HOA, but when I saw that fine slip this past Tuesday morning, I stepped outside to find a bright orange notice taped to my front door. My hands shook as I read it. Immediate fee increase, $600 per month. Violation. Excessive vehicles on property. Excessive vehicles? Really, it's just 3 cars in my driveway. The truck I need for my construction company, my wife Emily's SUV, she's a night shift nurse, and the old Toyota we bought for Ethan, our 18-year-old son who just started college. Right there, holding that glaring orange fine, my head felt like it was steaming. Not just because of the $600 fee, but because of how Linda Hayes and this Cedar Grove HOA have controlled us for far too long. I looked out the window and saw her pacing back and forth with her green clipboard, pretending to check the neighbor's fence, but eyeing my driveway. That sight reminded me of something from long ago, something I've never told anyone but Emily. When I was a kid, around 10, my family lived in another neighborhood ruled by an HOA like this. My dad, Robert, taught me everything about construction. He fixed up our house and yard himself, but that HOA never left him alone. They fined him for everything: grass over 2 inches, trash cans out an hour past curfew. Eventually, the fines piled up so high he couldn't pay them. I still remember the day he had to sell the house, standing at the door watching the moving truck pull away, eyes red but silent. Before he passed, he grabbed my hand and said, "Daniel, if you ever have to fight people like that, play the long game. Don't let them crush you." I've carried those words with me all these years, and now they echoed in my head as I watched Linda out there. She wasn't just targeting my cars, she was targeting my family, the life I've built for Emily and Ethan. So there I stood, coffee mug in hand, watching Linda Hayes strut around the yard with her green clipboard. I was still fuming over that $600 fine, but I knew I had to stay calm, at least for now. I turned back inside where Emily was getting ready for work. She's a nurse at the local hospital, often pulling night shifts, so that SUV in the driveway is what she needs to get to work in Oregon's rainy weather. "Linda out there again?" Emily asked from the living room, her voice tired from hearing me gripe about this all week. "Yeah," I replied, setting my mug down. Just then, Ethan, our 18-year-old, came downstairs in a hoodie, keys to the old Toyota we'd just bought him for college in hand. "Dad, I'm gonna go practice driving a bit," he said. I nodded, smiling. He'd just gotten his license, and that car was a reward we'd saved up for, not anything fancy, just a reliable old ride. But to Linda, it was an excuse to fine us. I went out to get the mail, deliberately walking slow to see how Linda would react. She was pretending to inspect Ellen Pierce's flower beds across the street, but her eyes flicked toward me. Right then, Ethan pulled out of the driveway, engine rumbling. Linda spun around, snapping photos with her phone like a paparazzi. I couldn't hold back anymore, stepping forward and saying, "Hey Linda, what are you doing?" Her voice came back syrupy, that fake tone everyone knows. "Mr. Carter, I'm just documenting the violation. 3 cars in your driveway is over the limit." I scoffed. Over the limit? My truck's for work, Emily's SUV is for her job, and Ethan's is his first car. This is my driveway, not a public lot. Linda waved her hand like I was being ridiculous. "Rules are rules, Mr. Carter. If you don't have enough garage space, maybe Cedar Grove isn't the place for you." She turned on her heel, heels clicking on the sidewalk, leaving me standing there with anger boiling up. I went back inside and told Emily. She sighed. "Why not park Ethan's car in the garage? Avoid the hassle?" "No," I said firmly. "The garage is full of my tools and your medical supplies. We shouldn't have to hide our cars like criminals." I remembered how Linda smirked at the last HOA meeting when I tried explaining the garage situation. "Rules are rules, Mr. Carter," she'd said, barely looking up from her phone. I wanted to yell then, but I knew I had something she didn't expect. 65% of Cedar Grove in my hands through Evergreen Holdings. Linda wasn't just targeting my cars, she was targeting my family's freedom in our own home. She thinks she can find me over 3 cars in my driveway, but she doesn't know I've been holding the ace up my sleeve. I've quietly bought up most of Cedar Grove over the past 5 years through my company, Evergreen Holdings. 6 years ago, when Emily, Ethan, and I first moved to Cedar Grove, I saw how weird this HOA was right away. They fined people for everything: unmowed grass, misplaced trash cans, even hanging an American flag too long after Independence Day. Back then I just thought, I won't let them control my family like they did my dad. I work in construction, but I also run a small company called Evergreen Holdings for real estate investments. At first I bought houses just to turn a profit. Cedar Grove's a nice Oregon suburb, stable home prices, easy to rent out. But then I noticed something: every time a house went up for sale, it was usually because the owners were fed up with Linda's HOA and wanted out. That's when I got the idea. The first deal happened about 5 years ago. An older couple down the street, the Harpers, decided to sell after Linda fined them $200 for a porch painted an unapproved color. I met them through a broker, made a good offer, and bought the house through Evergreen Holdings. But here's the best part: I didn't put my name on anything. I used an anonymous LLC, a small shell company no one could tie to me. The Harpers moved out, I rented the place, and no one, not even Linda, knew I was the new owner. I stood in that yard the first time, watching Linda patrol a few houses down, and thought, if I keep this up, one day I'll own this whole neighborhood. From then on I kept an eye on every house that went up for sale. Every time someone left, usually because of Linda and her petty fines, I swooped in. I bought a young family's house after they got fined for their dog barking, then another from an old man fed up with the no veggies in the yard rule. All through different LLCs, all in secret. I wasn't just buying houses, I was buying the chance to change Cedar Grove from the inside. Linda had no clue, still ruling the neighborhood like a queen, while I quietly built my empire. Now I own 65% of this place, and Linda still thinks I'm just some annoyed construction guy mad about fines. She's in for a big surprise. As I stood in the house, thinking about the secret real estate empire I'd built through Evergreen Holdings, I couldn't help but smirk. Linda Hayes still doesn't know a thing, and that's my advantage. But to understand why I had to go this far, I need to tell you about Linda, the one behind this Cedar Grove HOA. She's not just a tough president, she's a living nightmare this whole neighborhood has had to endure. Linda Hayes, about 50, lives in the biggest house at the end of the street, a 2-story place with a huge backyard, pool, and gleaming white fence. From the outside you'd think she's successful, but I've heard she used to be a bank employee in Portland and got fired for losing a big client. No one knows the full story, but since coming to Cedar Grove, she acts like it's her personal kingdom. Her husband, George, is a shady businessman who sells insurance over the phone and never shows up to HOA meetings. Their son, Tyler, mows lawns, and guess who gets the contract to cut the HOA's common areas? Yep, Linda. That deal's worth thousands a year, yet the grass is always yellow because Tyler barely waters it. Linda rules Cedar Grove like a queen, but not a fair one. She uses her green clipboard and phone to log every violation from parked cars to overgrown flowers, then slaps fines left and right. But if you're her friend, like Susan or Bob from the Hill Houses, you never see a fine. I've seen Susan leave her Christmas tree out till March, and Linda called it cheerful. Meanwhile, Ellen Pierce, an 80-year-old widow, got a $100 fine for a flower pot too big blocking the walkway. Linda doesn't just fine people, she brags about it. I heard she told her golf club friends, the HOA keeps the neighborhood clean of undesirables. She lives lavish off our fines. That pool in her backyard, I'd bet it's built from those maintenance fees no one ever sees spent. She's not just targeting me with that $600 fine for 3 cars, she's targeting the whole neighborhood. First, there's Ellen Pierce, the 80-year-old widow across from me. She's alone, tending the prettiest flower pots in the area, if you ask me. But one day I saw Linda in front of Ellen's house, measuring each pot with a ruler. I was in my yard, truck nearby, but my eyes were on her. Linda scribbled on her clipboard, and a few days later, Ellen called me, voice shaky, "Daniel, they fined me $100 for pots too tall, saying they obstruct the view." I broke my arm last month. How could I move them? I comforted her, but inside I was furious. Linda knew Ellen couldn't lift those pots, yet she fined her anyway. Then there's David Lynn, a chemistry teacher at the nearby high school, quiet guy, always tending his little sunflower garden. One winter morning, I saw him shoveling snow around his car to get to work, but it was slightly over the line in his own driveway because of the snow. Linda walked by, snapped a photo instantly. A week later, David told me over the fence, I got a $75 fine for improper parking. It was in my own yard. I nodded, but mentally added another victim to Linda's list. And Sarah Brooks, 2 houses down, was the first to openly suspect Linda. A single mom working at the grocery store, she often had her oldest son haul stuff home in his pickup. One time, he parked overnight in Sarah's driveway to fix her roof. Linda showed up, took pictures, and sent a $150 fine for an unfamiliar vehicle. Sarah was so mad she yelled across the yard, "This is my son, not some stranger." Linda just smirked and walked off, leaving Sarah with the fine in hand. I started keeping track of everything. Every time Linda fined someone, I noted the date, time, reason, and took pictures if I could. I set up a small security camera in my yard, aimed at the street, to catch her patrols. Once I recorded her ignoring Bob's huge truck, her buddies blocking the sidewalk, while she fined David for being off by inches. I saved it all on my laptop, photos, videos, fine slips I got from Ellen and Sarah. I knew I needed evidence to take Linda down, and I was building a stockpile she couldn't counter. Every fine she issued gave me more ammunition. With all the evidence I'd gathered on Linda, and how she runs Cedar Grove like a queen, I knew I was on the right track. But to take her down, I needed more than photos and videos. I needed real power. That's when my plan to buy up properties through Evergreen Holdings kicked into the next phase. After that first deal with the Harpers, I realized something. Linda and her HOA were the main reason people left Cedar Grove. Every time someone moved out, I saw an opportunity. I started watching for every for sale sign in the neighborhood, calling brokers, and making offers through different anonymous LLCs. I didn't want anyone, especially Linda, connecting the purchases to me. Once I bought a young family's house on the corner. They left after Linda fined them $300 for their dog barking at midnight, while Susan's dog, her friends, barked all day with no issue. I stood in that yard, watching Linda patrol a few houses away, and thought, keep it up, she's helping me out. I rented the place out, money flowed in, but more importantly, I gained another piece of the puzzle. Then there was another time I bought Old Man Henry's house, a widower living alone. He got fined for growing tomatoes in his backyard. Linda called it a landscape violation. Henry was so fed up, he sold the house the next week. I met him through a friend, paid cash through a new LLC, and he moved to Florida. Standing in his empty house, looking at the uprooted tomato beds, I told myself, I'll turn this place into somewhere everyone can live freely. And so it went. I kept buying houses, one by one, from people who couldn't take Linda anymore. By the 5th year, I owned 65% of Cedar Grove, over 30 homes, all through different LLCs to keep it under wraps. But there was one time I almost got caught. It was an HOA meeting 2 years ago. Linda stood at the podium, bragging about keeping property values stable, then suddenly asked, by the way, who's behind this Evergreen Holdings buying up houses in our neighborhood? My heart pounded. I sat in the back row pretending to scroll my phone, but my mind was racing. A neighbor, maybe hearing rumors, said, I heard it's a big company from Portland. I exhaled, chiming in, yeah, probably just some out-of-state investors. Linda nodded and moved on, but I knew I had to be more careful. From then on, I hired a lawyer in Salem to handle the paperwork so no one could trace it back to me. Linda didn't suspect a thing, still thinking I was just a grumpy construction guy mad about fines. Every house I bought brought me closer to the day I'd face her. I wasn't just buying homes, I was buying control of Cedar Grove, piece by piece, just like my dad taught me. Play the long game. Linda didn't realize that every time she fined someone, she pushed them right into my hands. That night in the garage, I looked at the neighborhood map on the table, each lot I owned highlighted in yellow. I said to Emily, I'm almost ready. She smiled. She'll fall flat when she finds out. I nodded, because I knew Linda wasn't just messing with me. She was messing with a plan I'd built for 5 years, and now, that moment was getting close. With 65% of Cedar Grove in my hands, through Evergreen Holdings and the pile of evidence I'd collected on Linda, I knew I had the upper hand. But I wasn't ready to strike yet. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment. Then Linda herself forced the turning point, like she was begging me to act. Remember that $600 fine I mentioned at the start? That was the final straw, and I'll tell you what happened that day. That Tuesday morning, after I ripped the orange notice off the door, I barely had time to calm down before I saw Linda in the yard. I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window, watching her in her early morning tracksuit, green clipboard tucked under her arm, phone up snapping pictures of my 3 cars, the truck I use for my construction company, Emily's SUV, and Ethan's Toyota. She stood there, taking shots from every angle, like she was filing a report for the FBI. This was the 3rd time that week she'd done this, and I knew the fine wasn't random. I turned back inside, yelling to Emily, "She's out there again." Emily stepped out from the living room, dressed in her nurse scrubs, prepping for her night shift. "Taking pictures again?" she asked, voice weary. "Yeah," I said, gripping my coffee mug tight. Ethan, eating breakfast at the table, looked up. "Dad, why does she keep targeting us?" I sighed, "Because she thinks she can bully whoever she wants." I stepped into the yard, pretending to check the mailbox but really to watch Linda. She glanced at me from afar, flashed a fake smile, then turned away, her sneakers squeaking on the sidewalk. I went back inside, opened the fine slip again. Immediate fee increase, $600 per month. Violation, excessive vehicles on property. $600 a month, just for 3 cars my family needs to live and work. I sat on the couch, hands still shaking, but this time not just from anger. I knew it was time to act. Emily sat beside me, reading the slip. "Daniel," she said softly, "why not park Ethan's car in the garage? Avoid the trouble with her." I looked at her, shook my head. "No, Em, the garage is full of my tools, and your medical gear. I don't want us hiding our cars like criminals in our own home." I remembered the last HOA meeting when I tried explaining the garage situation to Linda. She sat there, eyes glued to her phone, smirking. "Rules are rules, Mr. Carter. If you don't have space for your cars, maybe you should consider somewhere else." I'd wanted to slam the table then, but I stayed quiet, knowing I had something she didn't expect: 65% of this neighborhood. Linda wasn't just raising fees. She was declaring war on me, my family, this whole area. I stood up, went to the garage, opened my laptop and pulled up the Cedar Grove map, each lot I owned highlighted in yellow. I'd been waiting 5 years, and now Linda had just given me the perfect reason to strike. I turned to Emily. "She thinks she can keep pushing me down, but she's wrong." Emily nodded. "You've got to show her, Daniel." I smiled, because I knew the real fight was about to start. Linda had no idea about my plan, the evidence I'd gathered, or that I owned nearly all of Cedar Grove. After Linda backed me into a corner with that $600 fee, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I called my lawyer, said, "Get the paperwork ready," and now it was time to put everything on the line. Linda didn't know she'd just lit the fuse for the biggest battle Cedar Grove would ever see. But before I tell you what happened at that emergency HOA meeting, let me show you how I prepared. This was when everything I'd built over 5 years, 65% of the neighborhood, the evidence came into the light. Right after hanging up with the lawyer, I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop. Emily stood beside me, pouring coffee. "What are you going to do about Linda?" I grinned. "I'm going to show her who really owns Cedar Grove." I pulled up the neighborhood map, every lot I owned through Evergreen Holdings highlighted in yellow, 65% over 30 houses. I opened the evidence folder, photos of Linda measuring Ellen's flower pots, video of her ignoring Bob's truck, but fining David, fine slips from Sarah Brooks. I said to Emily, "This is my ammo. Linda thinks she can fine us for 3 cars, but she's about to lose big." Ethan walked in, glanced at the screen. "You going public with all this, Dad?" I nodded. "You bet, son. It's time." I called Matt, my lawyer in Salem, who'd kept my LLC's secret for 5 years. "Matt," I said, Linda just hit me with a $600 fine for my cars. She's calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight, 7 p.m. I want to drop everything. Ownership, evidence, all of it. Matt laughed over the phone. I've been waiting for this day, Daniel. I'll bring the docs proving you own 65% of Cedar Grove, plus copies of the HOA bylaws you can use to flip the table. Send me the evidence files. I'll compile them into a tight package. I sent them right over photos, videos, fine slips, everything I documented. Matt added, can you get some neighbors as witnesses? It'll hit harder if they speak up. I agreed, hung up, and got to work. I called Ellen Pierce first. Ellen, I said, tonight Linda's holding an HOA meeting to push new car rules. Can you come tell them how she fined you over the flower pots? She sighed. I'll be there, Daniel. I'm sick of how she bullies us. I called David Lynn next. David, want to share how she fined you for parking off by an inch? I'm revealing something big tonight. He sounded surprised. What big thing? I chuckled. You'll see. Just show up. Finally, I texted Sarah Brooks. Sarah, 7 p.m. tonight, HOA meeting. Can you tell them about the fine for your son's truck? She replied instantly. I'll be there. Linda needs to be stopped. I went back to the garage, printed the neighborhood map and papers. Matt emailed a list of the 30 houses I owned, LLC contracts, and a section of the HOA bylaws saying the majority owner can call for a vote to change the board. I stuffed it all in a briefcase, checked the security cam. Linda hadn't shown up again, probably busy prepping for the meeting. I sat down, looked at Emily. She called this emergency meeting to push a new rule. 2 cars per house, garaged only. She thinks she'll win easy. Emily shook her head. She doesn't know what you've got. I nodded. Exactly. Tonight she's in for a shock. I stood up, checked the clock, 3 hours left. I called Matt one last time. Everything's set. He said, set, files are tight, and I'll meet you at the hall at 6:30 to hand them over. Linda doesn't stand a chance. I hung up, looked out at the yard. Ethan's Toyota still parked there next to my truck and Emily's SUV. Linda wanted to fine us for living normally in our own home, but I'd use that to take her down. 5 years of prep, and now it was time for the knockout blow. I walked into the Cedar Grove community meeting room at 6:45 p.m. Briefcase in hand, heart pounding but mind ice cold. Linda had called this emergency meeting for Tuesday, 7 p.m., to push her new car rules, and I knew it was the perfect chance to strike. Matt, my lawyer, stood in the corner, nodding as I approached. Ellen Pierce, David Lynn, and Sarah Brooks were already seated in the middle row, eyes on me with expectation. The room was packed, over 50 residents, shoulder to shoulder, whispering. Linda had gone overboard this time. She'd hired a pro photographer to snap my yard from every angle, making 3 normal cars look like an illegal lot. I sat in the back row waiting. Linda stepped to the podium at 7 sharp, banging her little green gavel. Let's begin. She wore a dark blue blazer, reading glasses, and a smug smile. As you all know, we've got an issue with some properties not following vehicle rules. She clicked a remote, and a big screen lit up with photos of my yard, my truck, Emily's SUV, Ethan's Toyota. The Carter residence here has turned their yard into a junk lot, she said, voice dripping sarcasm. A few of her front row friends nodded, but I saw Ellen shake her head in disgust. Linda went on. This is their son's car, parked over 48 hours straight. She didn't mention Ethan only comes home weekends from college. She flashed a chart. Property values dropped due to violations like this, then read anonymous complaints, probably from her cronies. I sat there, gripping my briefcase, listening to her ramble. She pulled out a thick file. I've tracked every vehicle in and out of the Carter house for 3 months. People started murmuring, some glaring at me. Sarah Brooks shot up. Linda, you're overreacting. Those are just normal cars in their yard. Linda flushed, snapping, you don't have the floor. Her husband George began passing out the new rule proposal, 2 cars per house, garaged only. Linda declared, we'll vote now, all in favor. That's when I stood. I walked to the front slowly, adjusting my tie. Point of order, Madam President. Linda peered over her glasses, eyes narrowing. You don't have permission to speak, Mr. Carter. I smiled. Per HOA bylaws, Section 7.3, any owner can raise a voting procedure issue. The room went dead silent. I opened my briefcase, pulled out the Cedar Grove map. Before we vote, I think everyone should know the current ownership structure of this HOA. I held it up. Over the past 5 years, Evergreen Holdings has been buying homes here. Linda started paling as I went on, and as the owner of Evergreen Holdings, I want you all to know who holds the majority of Cedar Grove. I paused, locking eyes with each board member. I own 65% of this neighborhood, over 30 homes. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. I held up the stack of papers Matt prepped. Here's the ownership contracts, all legal. Linda clutched the podium, hands trembling. You can't do that. I replied calmly. I already have, Linda. Now let's talk about your shady oversight. I projected on the screen photos of Linda measuring Ellen's pots at 4 a.m., video of her skipping Bob's truck but fining David, emails of her bragging about using fines to keep the neighborhood clean. Residents started booing. I turned to Linda. You fined me $600 for 3 cars, but what about you using HOA money for your pool? George whispered something to her. Her face went white. Ellen stood, voice shaky. You fined me $100 when I'd just broken my arm, David added. You fined me over snow while your friend parks anywhere, Sarah yelled. You fined my son for helping me fix my house. Linda banged her gavel. Silence. But no one listened. I raised my hand. I moved to dissolve the current board and hold a new election with clear rules. David shouted. Seconded. Hands shot up across the room. Linda grabbed her purse yelling, meeting adjourned. I countered, per 7.3, you need a majority to adjourn, and I don't think you have one anymore. I pointed to the papers on the table. I opened another file. Now let's talk about the $10,000 for public pool repairs last year. Money gone, pool still cracked. Linda slumped against the wall, face bloodless. I looked around. We're changing Cedar Grove, starting tonight. Residents clapped, phones up recording. Linda was done and she knew it. After that fateful night at the HOA meeting, when I revealed I owned 65% of Cedar Grove and exposed Linda's wrongs, I thought it was over. She stood there, pale, clutching the door as the neighborhood cheered for change, but Linda Hayes wasn't the type to go down easy. She stormed out that night, and I knew the fight wasn't finished. You won't believe what happened next. Linda dragged me to court, and that's when things got even crazier. 2 days after the meeting, I got a court summons. Linda was suing me, claiming I violated HOA rules by secretly buying too many homes through Evergreen Holdings. She demanded an emergency injunction, my voting rights in the HOA stripped, and even a fine for conspiring to seize control of the neighborhood. I read it, smirked. She really doesn't know when to quit. Emily looked at me, worried. Daniel, can she win? I shook my head. No way, Em, I've been ready for this for years. I called Matt right away. She's suing me. You got everything set? Matt laughed. Leave it to me. We've got enough to crush her. The trial was 2 weeks later at the Oregon County Courthouse. Linda sat across, in a gray suit and fake pearls, next to an expensive lawyer George probably borrowed money to hire. She glared at me like I'd ruined her life. The judge banged the gavel, and Linda's side went first. Her lawyer argued, Mr. Carter secretly manipulated Cedar Grove, buying homes through shady companies, violating the HOA's spirit. They flashed photos of my yard, harping on the 3 cars like it was the crime of the century. I sat there tapping the table lightly, waiting my turn. Matt stood, coolly opening his briefcase. Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary. He played the first video, Linda measuring Ellen's pots at 4 a.m., crystal clear on my security cam. The courtroom buzzed. Matt continued. Here's Mrs. Hayes ignoring her friend's truck but fining David Lynn for a few inches. The judge squinted, taking notes. Then Matt dropped the hammer. This is an email from Mrs. Hayes to a friend, bragging that fines keep the neighborhood clean, actually used to fix her backyard. I glanced at Linda, her face flushed, hands gripping her chair, but there was more. Matt called witnesses. Ellen stepped up, voice trembling. Mrs. Hayes fined me $100 when I'd just broken my arm, couldn't move my pots. David said, she fined me $75 over snow, but her friend got a pass. As Sarah Brooks added, she fined my son $150 for parking to help fix my house. The judge's brow furrowed. Then Matt showed a check copy, $10,000 from the HOA fund to Tyler's lawn company, Linda's son, while the public pool stayed cracked. Linda jumped up. That's legitimate expense. But Matt hit back, an email of Linda gloating to a friend in Hawaii. Thanks to rule breakers, I got this vacation. The room went quiet, then erupted. I stood, staring Linda down. You fined me $600 for cars my family needs to live. But you used our money to live lavish. You thought you were untouchable, but you were wrong. Matt added, Mr. Carter's 65% ownership is legal, verified by 3 law firms. Mrs. Hayes has no standing to block it. The judge banged the gavel. Enough. He reviewed my Evergreen Holdings ownership papers, then eyed Linda. Do you have a defense? She stammered. I was just doing my job. But her lawyer was sweating, speechless. After an hour's recess, the judge returned. I dismiss Mrs. Hayes' suit. Further, I order a full audit of Cedar Grove HOA finances for the past 5 years. Linda collapsed in her chair, hands over her face. Matt whispered, You won. I nodded, but I knew this wasn't just a legal win, it was a win for the whole neighborhood. As we left, my phone buzzed non-stop, texts from residents. Linda mass emailed, resigning immediately, blaming larger forces for pushing her out. I watched her shuffle to her car, typing furiously, but no one cared anymore. I turned to Matt. She's really done. He grinned. Yeah, but be ready. Her buddies might not give up easy. I nodded, knowing Linda might be down, but her remnants lingered. Still, I had the law and the neighborhood behind me. After winning the lawsuit against Linda in court, I felt like I'd shed a decade-long burden. Linda resigned immediately via a mass email blaming larger forces, but no one believed her anymore. She lost miserably, and I knew Cedar Grove was about to turn a new page. A few days after the trial, I was fixing my truck in the driveway when I heard a loud engine rumble. Looking out the window, I saw a moving truck parked in front of Linda's house, the 2-story place with the lavish pool she built with our fine money. Linda stood in the yard, pointing and scowling, while movers hauled stuff out. George stood quietly beside her, and Tyler lugged his lawnmower onto the truck, looking like he'd just been chewed out by his mom. I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the scene with a grin I couldn't hide. Then I saw it, a fine from the new HOA where she'd moved, slapped on her car windshield for parking wrong. I burst out laughing. She can't escape it. Linda shot me a venomous glare. It said nothing, just got in the car and drove off. That was the last I saw of her in Cedar Grove. I went back inside, called Matt right away. She's gone. He chuckled over the phone. Good. Now what are you doing with the neighborhood? I replied, rebuilding it but not alone. I held a residents' meeting the next week, not in the cold meeting room but right in the neighborhood park under the cedar trees. Over 60 people showed up, bringing folding chairs and coffee, eyes bright with hope. I stood up. Linda's gone, but we need a new HOA board, not to control but to protect this place. I suggested an election right then, but refused to run for president. I've done enough, I said, let someone else lead. Ellen Pierce raised her hand. I'd like to try. David Lynn stood. Me too. Sarah Brooks grinned. Count me in. We voted on the spot, Ellen as president, David handling finances, Sarah on community relations, plus 2 more from the Hill area. I handed them the map of the 65% I owned through Evergreen Holdings. I'll back you, but you decide. That night, we scrapped Linda's 2-car limit rule. People cheered when I said, park as many cars as you want, as long as it's in your yard. We ditched the tall grass and big flower bands too, and added a new plan. Fix the public pool with audit money recovered from Linda. The next week, I saw Ellen leading kids to the park, pointing out where the new playground would go. David brought his calculator to my house. Budgeting. We can use HOA fees to help seniors fix their homes. Sarah threw the first no permit needed BBQ. First time I saw the whole neighborhood laughing together like that. Linda left a mess, but we were cleaning it up, step by step. I stood in my yard, watching Ethan park his Toyota next to mine, and thought, this is the real Cedar Grove. I didn't need to be president, because I trusted Ellen, David, and Sarah to outdo Linda 100 times over. They didn't rule. They listened. Linda might be gone, but I knew some of her friends stayed, quietly watching. I wasn't worried. Now we had the whole neighborhood behind us. Cedar Grove wasn't Linda's kingdom anymore. It was our home. 3 months after Linda left Cedar Grove, I stood in my yard, looking at the neighborhood I'd fought to change. Linda and her tyrannical kingdom were just a memory now, but what we built after mattered more. With the new HOA board led by Ellen, David, and Sarah, Cedar Grove wasn't a place people feared fines anymore. It became a real community. And I'll tell you how it all changed, because the results went beyond anything I'd hoped. First, we used the audit money, nearly $20,000 Linda had to repay, to fix the public pool. No more cracks or green moss. Now the neighborhood kids, even Ethan when he visited, swam there every weekend. Ellen oversaw the project, leaning on her cane but voice full of excitement. First time I've seen this pool work since I moved here. David recalculated HOA fees, cutting them in half, using the funds for a new playground in the park. I saw kids shooting hoops there every afternoon, no longer fined for noise like in Linda's days. Sarah started monthly BBQs, inviting everyone, and for the first time, I saw neighbors shoulder to shoulder, laughing instead of avoiding each other. The rules changed too. We trashed Linda's dumb regulations: no more 2-car limit, no veggie garden bans, no fines for tall flowers. David replanted sunflowers in his yard, and Ellen put huge flower pots on her porch. Nobody dared complain. One evening I stood outside, watching Ethan park his Toyota next to my truck, and Emily's SUV. 3 cars, no fines, because it's our home. Home values in the area spiked 18% in the first month after Linda left, according to a broker I know. Funny how people prefer living where they're respected, not ruled by fear. I decided to rename the neighborhood. One morning I put up a sign at the entrance, Carter Grove, where good neighbors make the neighborhood. Residents voted yes instantly, and Ellen smiled. You earned this name, Daniel. I didn't take all the credit, it was everyone's effort, but I'll admit, seeing that sign daily made me proud. Then a surprise came, a call from a TV producer in Portland. He'd seen the lawsuit news and wanted a documentary, how you turned an HOA nightmare into a dream. That's a story worth telling. I laughed, go for it, but make sure to film the new pool. One afternoon, I stood in the yard, watching kids play ball, David water his sunflowers, Ellen chat with Sarah over the fence. Linda might be somewhere, stuck in a new neighborhood with a 1-car rule, but here, we'd reclaimed our freedom. I thought of my dad, who taught me the long game, and knew he'd be proud of this. Cedar Grove, now Carter Grove, wasn't just where I lived, it's where I proved one ordinary person could change a community. 3 months passed since Cedar Grove became Carter Grove, and I still can't believe how we transformed this place. Linda's gone, the new board's thriving, and I could finally sit back and reflect. But the story doesn't end with a new pool or a neighborhood sign, it ends with a lesson I want to share, and this is the final wrap-up of this journey. One evening, I sat outside with Emily and Ethan, eating dinner under string lights we'd hung up last week. My truck, Emily's SUV, and Ethan's Toyota sat there, no fines, no photos snapped. Kids' basketball echoes came from the new park court, mixing with Ellen and Sarah's laughter a few houses down. I looked around thinking of my dad, Robert, who taught me to play the long game. If he were alive, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "You did it, son." 5 years quietly buying homes through Evergreen Holdings, documenting evidence, facing Linda at the HOA meeting and in court, all to protect my family and this neighborhood. But now I realized it wasn't just protection, it was building a place worth living in. Then my phone buzzed. A message from a watch group in Linda's new neighborhood, hundreds of miles away. "Mr. Carter, we read about your lawsuit in the news. Our HOA has another Linda. Any advice?" I laughed out loud, texting back, "Stick together, gather evidence, and don't let them crush you." Emily glanced over. "She'll never change, will she?" I shook my head. "Nope, but she's not our problem anymore." I pictured Linda, maybe arguing with her new HOA over Tyler's truck, and found it hilarious. But then it hit me, revenge wasn't beating her, it was showing people they could stand up like I did. Carter Grove's a living testament now. Home values up 18%, kids playing free, neighbors friendly, all because we dared to change. I didn't do it alone. Ellen, David, Sarah and the whole neighborhood backed me. The documentary that TV producer filmed last week airs soon, and I hope it inspires someone out there bullied by another Linda. The story of Daniel Carter and his fight with Linda Hayes at Cedar Grove mirrors a common reality in the U.S. today: power abuses in homeowners associations and the strength of individuals facing injustice. In America, HOAs govern about 60% of suburban homes, but many, like Daniel, endure absurd rules, like a $600 fine for 3 cars, essential for work and family, or Ellen fined for flower pots with a broken arm. It's straight out of real debates on Reddit or Nextdoor, where residents vent about petty HOA fines, but Daniel's tale isn't just complaints. He acted, quietly buying 65% of the neighborhood through evergreen holdings, logging evidence like Linda measuring flowers at 4 a.m., and rallying neighbors like Sarah and David to topple her. The lesson: don't just take it, prepare and fight smart. Life in the U.S. values individual rights, but as Daniel learned from his dad, playing the long game takes patience and planning, like his 5 years of home buying and leveraging the law, like beating Linda in court. Plus, handing the reins to Ellen as the new HOA president shows community power. One person starts it, but the whole neighborhood transforms, making Carter Grove free and friendly. Advice for Americans today: if you face injustice from an HOA or anywhere, gather proof, find allies, and use the system to fight. Like Daniel, you can turn pressure into opportunity, not just for yourself but for everyone. Thanks for following my journey to take down Linda and turn Carter Grove into a place worth living. Hit subscribe so you don't miss more stories of fighting for justice like this. See you in the next video, where I'll share more changes we've made.